It is insulting. We have asked 10 questions about the cost of food in the last 2 days, and not a single Liberal minister will get up and answer it.
Well, I know we're all in this House concerned about the price of food, and we're also concerned about our farmers.
How can this guy even talk about the economy when Mr. Poilievre has never actually worked in the economy, which was actually probably the best line of the day.
The village idiot, Kathleen Monk, has officially drank the Kool-Aid. She seems to think that it's a negative trait to have more job experience in one single career, and then spends her segment mocking Pierre Poilievre and then complimenting him. I'm not sure what she's on, but it's not making her smarter. Laryssa Waler lays out the facts very plain and simple during this segment, so much so that you can tell that every ounce of common sense just goes right over Kathleen's head. Even Vassy had to agree with Laryssa, for God's sakes. It doesn't take a genius to tell that people are hungry, you friggin' ogre. Enjoy this clip where Laryssa schools Kathleen with reality. Leave a like on the video to help me out in the algorithm. Consider subscribing. It's totally free, unlike the mainstream media that you unwillingly pay for.
The Conservatives continue to talk. I mean, today was inflation, so it's, somewhat understandable, but they continue to really drone in and focus in on cost of living issues. What does that tell you about how the two parties might shape up against each other as we head into the season of the budget?
Well, it certainly tells me that Pierre Poilievre has honed his communication skills over the last 20 years of being in Parliament. In fact, Wayne Lawn had this hilarious line in question period today where he said, how can this guy even talk about the economy when Mr. Poilievre has never actually worked in the economy, which was actually probably the best line of the day. But in terms of the fight over messaging, the Conservatives are clearly winning because they're focusing on the issue that matters most to Canadians: affordability, the cost of groceries, how increasingly life is unaffordable. And as we move into this budget that's now been kicked down by 2 weeks later into November, I think that we have to think about, what Carney's doing, and what he's promised to do is actually make deeper and more severe cuts than Stephen Harper made, with the drop cuts in the 2000s. In fact, they're closer to what they did in the 90s when the Liberals last desperately and deeply cut transfers to the provinces and some of our social services that Canadians really rely on. And so when Mr. Poilievre is speaking in the House and talking about how to make Canadians' life more affordable, I wonder, what does he think about how you actually make Canadians' life affordable? We're not just in an economic crisis. We're in an inequality crisis. We're in a crisis, a social cohesion crisis right now. And the way you make actually a country work is actually asking yourself questions: what makes the economy grow and what makes it stall out? And when you're sitting in traffic, or when you don't have health care, or you don't have child care, these are the things that prevent the economy from growing. And those are the things that consistently Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative opposition have opposed.
When you hear Minister Champagne say something like, this budget's going to have generational investment, that sounds very expensive. If they're promising generational investment after the last 10 years of a Liberal government that saw our broader public service grow by 40%, I'm kind of worried to see what that means. And I appreciate that it's a communications challenge to the general public about why government spending makes things more expensive. But I think the one guy who can do that and has done that and will continue to do that is Pierre Poilievre. He's very good at linking how government excess and government bloat and government spending makes prices go up. He did that leading into the last election. I think you're going to see more of that because that's kind of his sweet spot. And that's what people are worried about, and that's what people are talking about. And it's very hard for the federal government to help Canadians across the country understand why an LNG project in BC helps a family in Ontario or Nova Scotia. That's really hard to do. Pierre's in a much better spot than Carney is in the communications war that the budget's going to be.
Well, I think Laryssa brings up an interesting point, Laura, which is the government, and it's kind of why I chose that back and forth in the House of Commons, because the government is going to have to make a big effort in describing to people, because the fact is that LNG project could make someone's life better off. It could raise increase the size of our economy, and our exports would become less reliant. There are ways to say, here's how it affects your life. But so far, and I'll take the housing announcement as an example, trying last night to get that out of the housing minister, what does this mean for someone who can't afford a house in Toronto, was very difficult to do. They will have to make a really concerted effort to try and describe why these big macro things actually matter to everyone who's watching tonight.
Well, what else can be said? Pierre is playing a winning game, and it's just a matter of time before the Liberals completely crumble. This huge amount of unknown spending has people on edge, even the most brainwashed of the liberal loony brigade. It's simple. Explain to people how building LNG 100 years from now is going to put meat and potatoes on my table. And I'm not talking about a hungry man dinner. Explain to Canadians how building thousands of homes for your liberal buddies is going to allow the construction worker who builds them to buy Thanksgiving dinner for his family. When Carney and his stupid liberals fail to answer these basic questions in a manner that people can actually understand, their messaging falls flat because it has no basis. That's why it's a good thing for Pierre to be focusing on food, because people are hungry right now. So for this dumb broad to get up there and laugh at a man for having more experience in politics than the plant Mark Carney doesn't really convey the message of compassion.